I knew something was off the second I walked into that conference room and saw the caterer. That's how Delilah operated. Always more interested in charcuterie boards than compliance reports. The founder, Martin, God rest him, used to keep meetings tight. Black coffee, yellow notepads, numbers in red ink. Delilah preferred rosé, vision boards, and men named Bryce who called themselves efficiency architects. She called it a budget realignment summit. I called it a funeral. My funeral. I want this to be a celebration of growth, she said, raising a glass of something pink while I laid out the renewal schedule for our safety protocols, equipment certifications, and most importantly, our industrial risk insurance. The premiums had climbed like they always did after expansion, and I was clear. We were entering a window where lapse meant liability. She didn't even look at the numbers, just swirled her drink and said, "My husband built this company. You just keep the lights on." Then she slashed my department's funding by 52%, not 50, 52. Because even numbers are boring, she added with a laugh that made Bryce smirk like he'd just swallowed a Pinterest board. If you're listening to this and haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please do. 97% of people listen without subscribing, but it really helps the team and lets us keep making stories like this. A quick like or follow goes a long way. All right, back to it. I didn't argue. Not there. Not in front of the guy who thought agile compliance meant skipping steps if you said it fast enough. I simply packed up my binder, closed my laptop, and said, "I'll revise the risk posture accordingly." What I didn't say was, "I hope your Louboutins have steel toes." But I noted the date. I noted the attendees. And I noted that she signed off on the budget cut at exactly 4:47 p.m., 10 minutes before the insurance carrier's auto reminder hit her inbox. I know because I CC'd her on it. Twice. Delilah didn't understand what I did, and she didn't care. As long as the machines ran and the quarterly margins looked good, she assumed OSHA compliance was just a boring checkbox, something to throw at the admin team or loop in legal when things got dicey. But safety is a system, and I was the system. When Martin was alive, he used to joke, "She's not flashy, but she's the only reason we don't end up on a local news ticker." I'd laugh and remind him that safety didn't scale with charm. It scaled with inspection tags and documented procedures. But Martin was gone now, and Delilah had turned the boardroom into a sandbox for consultants who didn't know the difference between a shut-off valve and a pricing matrix. She replaced my second-in-command with someone from her book club, someone who thought a lockout-tagout was a trendy spa treatment. And me, I was told to rethink deliverables in light of evolving brand identity. So I did. I rethought everything, down to the expiration date on our critical liability coverage, which was due in 94 days. But she didn't see it. Didn't even click the link, the one that said, "Your coverage will lapse if no qualified safety officer is registered." She'd cut my lights, but I still held the fuse. I didn't tell anyone. Not HR, not my team, not even Rhonda in procurement, who'd once wept over a mislabeled MSDS form and still kept our compliance files tighter than the IRS. I just quietly authorized one last payment to extend the industrial risk policy, 90 days. That's all I could afford with what was left in contingency. I coded it under emergency mitigation, which it was. They just didn't know it yet. I scheduled safety audits like clockwork, booked the inspectors, drafted every renewal doc by hand, and loaded it into the system. Even created a dummy guide for whoever might stumble into the role next, assuming they could read past buzzwords like synergy scaffolding. I sent every form to Delilah's inbox marked with red flags and urgent tags. She replied once. "Thy ex will look soon." That was on a Friday. The forms sat unopened for 41 days. In the meantime, the efficiency consultant, a 32-year-old with a trust fund beard and an MBA from a school no one's heard of, started lurking around the plant floor. He asked where we could streamline safety messaging. I asked him what a confined space permit looked like. He blinked. They called a meeting. Just me, Delilah, and the consultant. Braden or Brendan or some B name that reeked of microbrews and startup failures. Delilah smiled like she was offering a spa package. "We're restructuring OpS leadership. You've built a strong foundation, but we think it's time to evolve the role." Braden added, "Your knowledge base is invaluable, but we're pivoting to modular oversight systems. Less human bottleneck." I nodded. "So you're removing the only human who knows how the bottlenecks work." Delilah's smile didn't flinch. No hard feelings. You're a systems guy. Systems don't need emotions. That was the last thing she said to me directly. I went back to my office, shut the door, and pulled the files. My resignation letter, dated, time-stamped, precise. The 90-day extension policy, paid, active, with expiration marked in red. Copies of every email I'd sent flagging the unsigned renewals, including one where I literally wrote, "Please sign this before the cutoff, or we risk full lapse." I slid the stack into a sealed envelope labeled Rockstone Policy Compliance, Final. Then I boxed the rest. Personal items, archived checklists, and a thumb drive with backups they'd never notice missing. No farewell party, no LinkedIn post, just silence. I walked past the safety boards I used to update weekly, past the emergency stop panel they never learned to test, past the team that glanced up, confused, like they couldn't quite name the change but knew something steady had just gone missing. They thought I was just the one keeping clipboards tidy. They never realized I'd also been the firewall. And now? They'd replaced me with a bullet list in a Google Doc written by someone who spelled flammable with an E. You don't work somewhere for 18 years and just stop watching. I kept tabs the same way I'd always tracked blind spots, quietly, with the patience of someone who knows exactly how long it takes for systems to break when no one's maintaining the pressure valves. Rockstone's ops bulletins were automated through a cloud portal, meant for vendors and regulators. Most folks never look at them unless something's burning or bleeding, but I did. Weekly, like I used to, even when Martin was alive. Old habits don't retire, they just go underground. It was all there in plain text. Equipment status logs, scheduled maintenance, expansion permits, and suddenly, a new post. Southern warehouse to double footprint, groundwork begins next month. No mention of a new safety lead, no record of a permit pull for hazardous materials reevaluation, no audit prep, no updated policy filings, just a bold font quote from their new ops lead, Todd Callahan, cousin to Braden the consultant, saying, "This expansion marks a new chapter in modernized efficiency." Todd had a degree in marketing. Delilah had posted a photo with him on LinkedIn, captioned, "Nepotism? No, just family values and vision." Meanwhile, I checked the state compliance registry. Safety officer, Rockstone Materials Plant 4 registered name, Beatrice Maddox certification, status, active renewal. Status, pending expiry, 27 days remaining, last compliance update by user B. Maddox. It was still me. Somehow, no one had filed a change. No one had submitted Form 22A to transition compliance responsibility, and no one had the clearance to log into the regulatory portal because I had built the system access tree myself. All sign-offs flowed through my chain. Without a new designation, there was no legal coverage. No one was authorized to sign a safety compliance form. No one could represent the plant in the event of an incident. They weren't just flying blind. They were soaring into a thunderstorm with the cockpit unplugged. I stared at the screen and sipped my coffee. No panic, no joy, just recognition. I didn't call anyone, didn't forward the link, didn't send a warning like I might have once upon a time. Instead, I printed the registry page, stamped the date, and filed it in a folder labeled Forecast. And I waited. Not to watch them fall, but to see how far they'd drift before they even noticed the ground was gone. I was halfway through my eggs and black coffee when I saw the headline crawl across the muted diner TV. Forklift fire at Rockstone Materials, minor injuries, operations suspended pending investigation. At first, I didn't move. Just watched the footage. Grainy aerials of Plant 4's southern dock, smoke curling like a slow confession from the roof vents. A reporter stood in front of the gates, reading off a clipboard like she was listing groceries. Sources say a subcontractor was injured. No fatalities reported. The company has not released a statement. I didn't need one. I already knew what it would say and what it wouldn't. The footage shifted to cell phone video. Fire crews, foam suppression, a stretcher. I recognized the layout. I'd written the evacuation drill they were fumbling through. The fire panel by Dock 12 hadn't been serviced in 9 months. I knew that because I had flagged it. Twice. And watched my work orders expire in the new system, cleared by Todd Callahan, now acting compliance liaison, whatever that meant. The subcontractor was from a third-party logistics firm, undertrained like most of them now, since Delilah had streamlined vendor onboarding to 2 slides and a selfie with the consultant. His gloves caught flame when the lift hit an overloaded pallet rack. Plastic wrap, industrial solvents, summer heat, simple chemistry, predictable, preventable, and now recorded. The claim came in from his employer's carrier within hours. Liability, medical, wage compensation, routine stuff. The response from Rockstone's insurer was anything but. Coverage lapsed. As of expiration date, no registered safety officer on file. Site non-compliant. Claim denied. I had that letter printed before the segment even ended. Back at the counter, the waitress topped off my coffee. "You used to work there, right?" she asked, nodding at the screen. I just said, "Long time ago." But inside, I could feel it. Tension building like static in the wires. The kind that hums low and dangerous before a storm. Delilah's people scrambled. Braden blamed the admin team. The admin team blamed the policy liaisons. Someone tried to reach out to an old safety vendor who'd retired 3 years ago. Another said the paperwork was probably in a shared folder. What no one said was my name. What no one realized was that the shared folder was built on my drive, that the protocols were written in my shorthand, that every automated trigger had been tied to a system only I had full access to. You don't get credit for protecting people in silence, but you also don't get blamed when you finally stop catching the falling knives. They thought I was just the clipboard lady, a human fire extinguisher they could store in a drawer until needed, but I'd walked away. And now? There was smoke in the rafters, and no one left who spoke the language of prevention. He started off with a voice like lukewarm tea, too soft, too polite, too rehearsed. "This is James Bellamy, counsel for Rockstone Materials. We're conducting an internal review related to the recent incident." He didn't say fire, didn't say injury, just incident, like he was asking about a spilled latte. "We're hoping you can help us clarify how safety oversight was formally transitioned after your departure. There seems to be some confusion." Confusion. That word sat in my ear like a mosquito whining behind drywall. I didn't answer right away. Just pulled the folder from my drawer, the one labeled expected calls. Inside, copies, printouts, logs, all arranged chronologically with paper clips, not staples. You don't staple things you might need to reorder in court. "I'll send you everything I have," I said. And I did. First page, my resignation letter, signed, notarized, scanned with a timestamp, 2 days before the insurance cutoff. Highlighted in yellow, the line that read, "No formal handoff of safety officer duties has been initiated." Next, the insurance renewal packet, all prepared, all correct, all unsigned, her signature line blank, staring up like an accusation. Then the paid 90-day extension confirmation, receipt, policy number, expiration date, circled in red ink, the very same date the fire occurred. And finally, 2 emails sent from my Rockstone address before my departure. Subject line, urgent, lapse risk, compliance chain broken. In one, I wrote, "No designated successor for safety officer on file. Systems will not notify regulators post-cutoff. Recommend immediate action." In the second, sent a week later, reminder, if no internal designation is completed by date, Plant 4 will fall out of compliance. I will not be available for filings past that point. Both emails were marked read. Both had delivery receipts. Bellamy didn't reply. Not that day. Not ever. But 3 hours later, a local business reporter posted an article quoting an unnamed board representative. The quote read, "This was an unforeseeable clerical oversight during a time of transition. We are working diligently to resolve the matter and remain committed to employee safety." Unforeseeable. I read it aloud, just to hear how ridiculous it sounded. I'd foreseen it. In Technicolor, in bullet points, with attachments and carbon copies and blinking red deadlines. I wasn't angry. I was surgical. I printed the article, clipped it to the front of the same packet I'd sent to Bellamy, and scrawled across the top in black Sharpie, "This was the handoff." They wanted plausible deniability. All I gave them was documented negligence, signed, dated, and delivered. And suddenly, the narrative wasn't just cracking, it was leaking liability. It didn't take long. The injured subcontractor's lawyer filed suit within a week. Wrongful oversight, unsafe working conditions, failure to disclose lapse in risk policy. He wasn't subtle about it either. Held a press conference on the courthouse steps with his client's hand still wrapped in gauze and the words reckless indifference practically painted across the microphones. Then came OSHA. The inspectors showed up unannounced at Plant 4. Full gear, full authority. They asked for the safety officer. No one had an answer. They asked for incident reports. The admin team handed over a flash drive, unsure if it was current or even labeled right. Turned out it wasn't. OSHA cross-referenced 4 years of logs. They found clear, concise documentation, my name stamped at the bottom of every single report. Incident dates, corrective actions, follow-up sign-offs, all tidy, all accountable, until the day I left. After that, nothing. No reports, no logs, no documentation of drills, lockout procedures, or vendor training, not even a fire extinguisher check. It was as if the entire safety infrastructure had just vanished, because it had, because they thought protocols were just folders. And they didn't realize the folders only worked if someone kept them alive. When the memo leaked, it spread like dry brush catching flame. It came from inside the insurer's office. Rockstone Materials, risk assessment final position, coverage expired, retroactive liability denied, no reinstatement pending due to internal procedural negligence. 7 figures, minimum, and still climbing. Delilah went silent on social media. Braden deleted his Efficiency for Growth blog. Todd, the cousin, was suddenly on leave. Rumor was he tried to backdate a compliance form and got flagged by the state's new digital timestamp validation system. They were cornered, not because I'd pushed them there, but because I'd stopped protecting them from the edges. One evening, my phone buzzed. An old colleague, Sarah from logistics. Honest, loyal, always ran her manifests clean. They're saying nobody told them the coverage had lapsed, she whispered, like even saying it too loud could burn her. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, funny. I told them exactly that. Just not twice. There was a pause, then she sighed. They thought it didn't matter. That was the thing. They thought I was optional, a redundant part, something to trim for the sake of quarterly fluff. But compliance isn't a checklist. It's a backbone. You don't notice it until it's gone. And when it snaps, it doesn't bend quietly. It breaks everything around it. The invitation didn't come through official channels. No email, no calendar hold. Just a handwritten note slid into my old P.O. box with a business card clipped to the top. Barrett Klein, External Counsel, Shareholder Litigation Division. It was quiet in the conference room. Neutral walls, no Rockstone logos, no nameplates, just 2 attorneys in charcoal suits and a paralegal tapping away on a laptop like she was scoring the silence. We appreciate you coming, Klein said, gesturing to the seat across from him. We represent a minority interest group currently reviewing their fiduciary exposure, specifically as it relates to the company's internal risk protocols, or lack thereof. I waited. We've reviewed statements made to regulators and insurers following your departure. They assert, as of the date of the incident, that no formal transition of safety oversight had occurred because, quote, the prior officer exited without procedural notice. He paused. Our question is simple. Did you have any reason to believe the company would misrepresent your departure in official filings? I didn't answer. Not verbally. I reached into my folder, pulled a single document, and slid it across the polished table. The termination letter, signed by Delilah Harwood, dated 3 days before the insurance lapse, acknowledging my resignation, confirming my release from duties, stamped with the company seal, filed through HR, titled Final Notice of Transition, Operations Compliance Officer. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Klein read it once. His colleague read it twice. The paralegal stopped typing. This alone voids their entire negligence defense. Klein muttered, half to himself. They can't claim ignorance after signing this. It's time-stamped. It's official, and it confirms they knowingly operated the site without designated compliance leadership after formal acknowledgement of termination. I stayed quiet. Klein straightened. Did they ever file a transition plan with the state? No, I said. And they had no qualified replacement, no internal coverage. The access protocols were never reassigned. He nodded, lips tight. We'll need a formal statement. I brought one, I said, handing over a sealed envelope labeled Statement of Record B. Maddox. He looked at it like it was radioactive. We've been waiting for a gap like this, the second lawyer said under his breath. They buried too much in administrative drift. This is a body blow. In the corner, the paralegal resumed typing, this time with purpose. They didn't ask me why I kept the paper. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, the entire room understood. I didn't save the files out of bitterness. I saved them because I knew the collapse was coming, and someone would need a map of where it started. The apology video dropped on a Thursday morning just before the market opened. Delilah sat in what looked like her home office. Tamed curls, no filters, the same white blouse she'd worn for the Founders Memorial. She blinked hard, paused often, and used every polished PR phrase you'd expect from someone whose empire was being pressure-washed in court filings. This was never about negligence, she said, voice trembling at just the right syllables. It was about miscommunications, during a time of transition. She didn't mention the subcontractor, or the lawsuit, or the internal memo confirming the lapse, but she did say the words deep regret 5 times, and we remain committed to safety, like it was still an option they controlled. The board issued their own update an hour later. Effective immediately, Delilah Harwood would no longer oversee daily operations. Her role would transition to strategic advisor, which is rich, considering her last strategy cost them their entire insurance buffer. They named an interim COO, not from inside, not from any of the consultants. A former federal regulator, actually, someone I recognized from a risk assessment panel I'd spoken at 6 years earlier. Someone who knew exactly how these things unraveled, and more importantly, how to stitch them back together without leaving fingerprints. That afternoon, I received an envelope via courier. No email, no subject line, just a thick manila folder and a simple card inside. Retainer proposal, litigation consultation scope, risk structure, compliance chain reconstruction, court prep duration, open-ended reporting, external counsel. Only public acknowledgement. None at the bottom was a handwritten note. You were the last one holding the rope. We didn't see it until after we fell. I accepted. Not for revenge, not for credit, just to ensure the cleanup didn't get delegated to the same hands that made the mess. But I set one condition, non-negotiable. I report only to outside legal, not to their ops team, not to the board, not to anyone still clinging to buzzwords and blame games. They didn't argue. The first day back, not back, just present. I walked into a temporary conference room with no nameplate and no welcome sign, just binders, scans, questions. I answered calmly, precisely, without warmth, but without malice. I wasn't here to be liked. I was here because they had finally learned the price of not listening. No interviews, no press releases, no welcome home. Just me, the paper trail, and the cold reality that systems don't forgive negligence. They only document it. I didn't return to Rockstone. I returned to the wreckage I'd warned them about, and this time I brought gloves. The last hearing ended without ceremony. No gavel slam, no gasps from the gallery, just a stack of filings, a few exchanged glances between attorneys, and the soft click of a closing laptop. Years of arrogance had been reduced to line items and exhibits, signed in black ink and sealed into public record. At the bottom of the master case document, buried beneath the procedural motions, the motions to dismiss, the exhibits from OSHA, the audit logs, the HR correspondences, was a yellow highlight, faint but deliberate. Final Safety Compliance Memo, authored by B. Maddox. It wasn't a mic drop. It was a tag. A footnote to the entire collapse. No headline, no LinkedIn post, just a quiet notation that when everything cracked, the last piece that had held was the one they let walk out the door. The memo itself was simple. 2 pages, dated 4 days before my resignation. Title: Post-Cutoff Risk Exposure Summary. The first sentence read, "Absent a qualified replacement and updated filings, the plant will enter non-compliance within 72 hours of policy expiration." No drama, no poetry, just math. The company settled 2 weeks later. 7 figures, NDA wrapped. No admission of fault, but every legal analyst knew what had happened. Their new insurer reviewed the court documents and promptly tripled their premium, added mandatory quarterly audits. Safety certifications had to be externally verified now, no more in-house rubber stamps. And in every adjacent industry, quarries, metalworks, chemical plants, something changed. Emails started flying, names were checked, old protocols were dusted off. HR departments quietly scheduled compliance reviews that had sat ignored for years. Not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't say, and what still happened. Delilah retreated from view entirely. Word was she moved out west, maybe rebranding herself, maybe trying to forget. But I suspect she remembers the moment the lights flickered and no one knew how to fix the breaker. I didn't take a new job. I didn't need to. People started calling, asking for audits, asking for structure. No fluff, no jargon, just someone who could see the whole system and say, "Here's what fails next." I never raised my voice, never leaked anything, never gloated, but I saved everything. And now, tucked into public record where anyone could find it, my name sat quietly on the document that drew the line between what came before and what followed. Because in the end, it wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record, about memory. Because systems don't need emotions, but they remember everything.